In this video, we'll explain what unemployment insurance benefits are, how to apply, how payments work, eligibility, and some other helpful information and tips. Our goal is to cover all of the basics, but please know that there may be some special circumstances or exceptions that may apply to you and your benefits. You can always find more information and resources online on the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development's website at dwd.wisconsin.gov/UI-BEN. DWD's unemployment insurance website has answers to frequently asked questions, how-to videos, phone numbers, and the handbook for claimants. Just in case you were wondering, claimant means someone who is filing for unemployment insurance payments. Another helpful website is jobcenterofwisconsin.com/jobloss. DWD's job loss website has some direct links to helpful resources found on the unemployment insurance website. And note, throughout the video, when you see this symbol or hear this tone, it will alert you that related resources are available online. All right, let's begin by explaining what unemployment insurance is. Unemployment insurance, or UI, is insurance that covers most workers. It pays out when you lose your job or your work hours are reduced and you meet eligibility requirements. The benefits or payments you receive help to replace a portion of your lost wages for a limited time. UI is mostly funded by payroll taxes that employers are required to pay. All of this happens behind the scenes, but helps to benefit you if you lose your job or your hours are cut. I find it helpful to think of UI like a bank account that you can open and use if and when you need it. In Wisconsin, if you want to receive UI payments, you must follow a 3-step process. Step 1, you'll file an initial claim application online. Step 2, you'll file a weekly claim certification online for each week you're seeking a payment. And Step 3, you'll register with Wisconsin Job Service if instructed to do so. You'll complete the first 2 steps by using UI's Online Benefit Services website, also referred to as the UI Claimant Portal. This is found at my.unemployment.wisconsin.gov. And you'll complete the 3rd step by going to jobcenterofwisconsin.com, commonly referred to as JCW. You will not need to sign up or create a new logon for each site. Once you've gone through that process on one of the sites, simply use your same username and password on the other sites. If you've created a username and password for either of those sites in the past, do not sign up for a new logon again. Doing so will cause a delay in you being able to file your initial claim application. If you've forgotten your username or password, there are instructions on the websites for how to retrieve that information. Once you created your username and password, your identity may need to be verified before you can file your initial claim. If verification is needed, you'll be asked additional questions. Do not share your username and password. When it comes to the UI Claimant Portal, you are responsible for all information shared and actions taken. Both of these websites have instructions for you to follow so that you can successfully complete all 3 steps. Take the time to carefully read the instructions. So let's start with Step 1, filing your initial claim application. By filing an initial claim online, you are notifying DWD that you are interested in receiving UI payments. DWD will then look into whether you are eligible. The general rule for filing your initial claim is that you should file once you're unemployed or once your work hours are reduced. In either of those situations, file in the first week that you want to receive a UI payment or the week after. Weeks run from Sunday to Saturday. If you wait to file your initial claim, you risk losing out on UI payments, so don't delay filing. The exception to the general rule is if you expect to lose your job or have work hours reduced, but that change hasn't happened yet. In this situation, you can file your initial claim up to 13 weeks before the change is expected to occur. For example, maybe your employer notified you that your job will be eliminated 2 months from now. In this situation, you can file your initial claim 8 weeks before your anticipated last day of work. We refer to this as locking in your benefit year. We'll talk more about the advantages of doing this later in the video. You'll file your initial claim application online using the UI Claimant Portal. You'll access the portal by going to my.unemployment.wisconsin.gov. This is where you'll log in using your username and password. For username, password, and log on frequently asked questions, visit jobcenterofwisconsin.com/jobloss. Once you've logged on, you can begin the initial claim application. You'll be asked a series of questions. Answering the questions will go much more smoothly if you have all of the information you need on hand. You'll need to know your Social Security number, your driver's license, as well as your work history over the last 18 months. Look online for the full list of items you'll need to know to complete the application. Visit jobcenterofwisconsin.com/jobloss. After you submit your initial claim application, you will be informed about your next steps. This may include having to register with Wisconsin Job Service. You may recall that I compared UI to a bank account at the start of this video. Well, filing your initial claim application is like opening the account. Once opened, DWD puts the right amount of money into your account based on your previous earnings. More on this later. You then can draw from that account for those weeks that you're not working or working reduced hours. To make withdrawals from the account, you need to file weekly claims. Moving on to step 2 in the process, filing your weekly claim certifications. Filing your initial claim application does not result in you getting UI payments. To trigger payments, you must file a weekly claim for each week that you're seeking a payment. For a week you want a UI payment, file your weekly claim once that week has ended. Remember, weeks run from Sunday to Saturday. You have a 14-day window to file your claim for that week. We recommend filing as soon as you're allowed, so don't forget. Here's an example. Jordan wants a UI payment for the week beginning January 3rd. He filed his initial claim on January 4th. Jordan's first opportunity to file a weekly claim for that week would be Sunday, January 10th. You'll file your weekly claim certifications online using the same website you used to file your initial claim application. Remember, go to my.unemployment.wisconsin.gov to access the UI claimant portal. Once logged on, you'll be asked to answer questions about the specific week for which you're seeking payment. You'll be asked questions like whether you attended school, were able to work full-time, refused available work, or worked any hours and earned any wages. If you're required to do a work search in order to receive UI payments, you'll also need to enter in your work search actions. We'll talk a bit more about work search actions later in the video. Remember, answer the questions only for the week that you are claiming. In other words, just the week for which you are seeking payment. For example, when asked if you quit a job, you are being asked if you quit a job during the week you are claiming. If you did not quit during that week, answer no. Also, be sure to answer the questions honestly. Providing false or inaccurate information is considered fraud, and the penalties for fraud are severe. When you are asked to report any wages for the week, you need to provide the amount of gross wages you earned that week, even if you haven't been paid for those wages yet. Gross wages are the wages you earn before any deductions are taken out, such as taxes. Sometimes when employers let their workers go, they provide dismissal or severance pay. If you receive this type of pay, report it on your weekly claim only if your employer allocated that pay to one or more weeks and your weekly claim covers one of those weeks. If your employer does not specify the week or weeks the pay is for, then don't report it. You probably are wondering what allocated pay means. It means your employer tells you that it has designated a specific amount to be paid weekly for a specific period of time. Let's cover 2 examples to see how this works. Example number 1. Jordan was earning about $600 a week at his job. Prior to Jordan's layoff, his employer notified him that he would receive $6,000 as severance pay. His employer said that the amount was to cover $600 per week for 10 weeks, starting the week after Jordan's layoff. Jordan received his severance checks 2 weeks after he was laid off. In this example, Jordan's employer allocated the severance pay by designating a specific amount, $600 for a specific period of time, the first 10 weeks following his layoff. So Jordan must report $600 on his weekly claim for the first 10 weeks. Example number 2. Tara was earning about $600 a week at her job. Prior to her layoff, her employer told her that she would receive $6,000 as severance pay, but didn't designate a specific amount for a specific period of time. In this example, the severance pay is not allocated, so Tara should not report it on any of her weekly claims. Review the Claimant's Handbook for more information on filing weekly claims, including how to handle other types of pay like holiday or vacation pay, workers' compensation, bonuses, profit sharing, retirement payments, and commission. Visit jobcenterofwisconsin.com/jobloss. Make sure you complete and submit your weekly claim before leaving the UI online system or closing the browser. If you don't, you'll have to start over. How can you tell that your weekly claim has been submitted? You'll see a confirmation page and your claim confirmation number. DWD's online UI system is available to use during certain hours, depending on the day of the week. Check online at jobcenterofwisconsin.com/jobloss for the schedule. Step 3. Register with Wisconsin Job Service. Most people filing for UI are required to register with Wisconsin Job Service in order to maintain eligibility for UI payments. If you are required to register, the system will alert you during the initial claim process. The purpose of registering with Wisconsin Job Service is to connect you with resources and opportunities to help you land your next job. If you are required to register, you will need to complete all steps of the registration process within 14 days of filing your initial claim application. You will not receive any UI payments until you register. Failure to fully register by the deadline will result in a suspension of payments until your registration is complete. To register with Wisconsin Job Service, go to jobcenterofwisconsin.com/UI. This website is also called JCW. Once you've logged on to the site, you'll be prompted to register for services and complete or upload your resume for employers to view. Okay, so we've covered the 3-step process you need to take to get UI payments. Number 1, file an initial claim application online. Number 2, file weekly claim certifications for each week you want to get paid. And number 3, register with Wisconsin Job Service if that applies to you. Now let's talk about how the payments work. Once you've filed your initial claim application, DWD will look at your past wages to see if you qualify for UI payments. How does DWD do this? Well, you may not have known this, but employers are required to report to DWD the wages they pay for each of their employees. They do this every calendar quarter. So, DWD looks at your reported wages across your first 4 of the last 5 completed quarters. This is called your base period. If you do not have enough wages to qualify for a claim using the base period as described, an alternate base period will be used. The alternate base period will be the 4 most recent completed calendar quarters before the week you filed your initial claim application for a new benefit year. If you had multiple employers during this time, DWD looks at your reported wages from all of them, so long as the wages were earned in covered employment. Covered employment means both the employer and the job are covered by federal and state UI laws. Most businesses are covered employers, but some employers, like most churches and small farms, are not. Similarly, most jobs are covered. However, there are some exceptions such as work-study and certain commission-only sales jobs. DWD calculates the amount of benefits or money that will be available to you through your UI account. This amount is called your maximum benefit amount. The money DWD places in your UI account is available for up to 52 weeks. This is called your benefit year. When you file weekly claim certifications, you're requesting payments from that account, and each time you're paid, you're drawing down from your available balance. Again, this is very similar to a bank account. DWD determines how much money you can draw from your UI account at a time. Your weekly benefit rate is the most you can receive in a week. To figure out your weekly benefit rate, DWD determines the quarter from your base period where you had the most wages reported and calculates 4% of that total. However, your weekly benefit rate can never be more than whatever the maximum rate is. The maximum rate is a cap that is set by the state law and can change from time to time. The current maximum rate is $370 as we record this video, but it can change. Let's take a look at a couple of examples to better understand how this might apply to you. Sam filed his initial claim application the week ending June 12th. Because he filed in June, the calendar quarters that DWD looks at to figure out his weekly benefit rates are January through December from the year before. During that period, Sam had only one employer, and he was paid the most wages in the quarter that covered October through December. In that quarter, he was paid $6,143.20. To calculate his weekly benefit rate, DWD multiplies that amount by 4%. So $6,143.20 times 4% equals $245.78. DWD rounds down, so Sam's weekly benefit rate will be $245. Keisha filed her initial claim application the week ending November 10th. Because she filed in November, the calendar quarters that DWD looks at to figure out her weekly benefit rate are July of the previous year through June of the current year. During that period, Keisha had 3 employers and was paid the most wages in the quarter that covered January to March. In that quarter, she was paid $9,651.33. To calculate her weekly benefit rate, DWD multiplies that amount by 4%. So $9,651.33 times 4% equals $386.05. However, the maximum weekly benefit rate DWD will pay is $370. So Keisha's weekly benefit rate will be $370. Hopefully, those examples helped. There's also a weekly benefit rate calculator available online at jobcenterofwisconsin.com/jobloss. You can use it to get an idea of what yours will be. Generally, within 7 days of you filing your initial claim application, DWD determines whether you've earned enough to qualify for UI payments. DWD will then mail your benefits computation. This is a letter that tells you the jobs that were included in your base period, the wages paid to you in each of the quarters in your base period, and your weekly benefit rate. Earlier, I explained what your maximum benefit amount is. It's the amount DWD places into your UI account. That amount is 26 times your weekly benefit rate, or 40% of your total base period wages, whichever amount is less. The general rule is that if you receive UI payments each week at your full weekly benefit rate, the most you can receive is 26 payments. The money in your UI account will last longer if you receive partial payments. So, what are partial payments? A partial payment is when you receive a weekly UI payment that is less than your weekly benefit rate because you're working and earning some wages. Remember, when you are filing your weekly claim certification, you need to report any hours you worked, wages you earned, and other income you received for that week. DWD will take that information and apply the partial wage formula to see if you qualify for a partial payment. The partial wage formula works like this. First, subtract $30 from your gross income you earned for the week. Next, multiply the amount you get by 0.67. Then, subtract that new amount from your weekly benefit rate. Finally, round down to the nearest whole dollar. Let's look at an example. Avery's weekly benefit rate is $200. This was previously calculated by DWD as part of her benefit computation. She works during the week and earns $250 in gross wages. To determine the amount of her benefit payment, UI uses the partial wage formula. Number 1, we subtract $30 from the gross wage amount. $250 minus $30 equals $220. Number 2, then we take that difference and multiply it by 0.67, which is 67%. $220 times 0.67 equals $147.40. Number 3, that sum is then subtracted from her weekly benefit rate. So $200 minus $147.40 equals $52.60. Number 4, since benefit payments do not include cents, it is rounded down. So $52.60 rounds down to $52. Avery is due $52 benefit payments for that week. I know it may seem complicated, but there's an online tool to help you estimate how wages and other income might affect your weekly UI payments. Find the partial UI benefits calculator at jobcenterofwisconsin.com/jobloss. The key thing to remember is that you may still be eligible for reduced UI payments if you are working part-time. And by doing this, you could extend the amount of the time you'll receive UI payments during your benefit year. We've covered a lot, but you may recall that earlier in the video, I said that you could lock in your benefit year by filing your initial claim application up to 13 weeks before you're supposed to be laid off or have had hours reduced. So why would you want to do this? There are several potential advantages to locking in a benefit year. It may result in you having a higher maximum benefit amount. Remember, that's the total amount of money put in your UI account. It may mean you qualify for a higher weekly benefit rate. That's the maximum amount you can be paid per week. It could also help you qualify for back-to-back benefit years. You see, once you file your initial claim application, that establishes your benefit year. If you work and earn at least 8 times your weekly benefit rate during your benefit year, you can qualify for a new benefit year once your first one ends. If you do lock in your benefit year, you'll have to file another initial claim application to reopen your existing claim once you do become unemployed or your hours are reduced. So at this point, you're probably wondering, how do I get paid? Your UI payments will be paid to you either by direct deposit or a prepaid debit card. If you select the prepaid debit card, it will be mailed to you. You'll be asked to select the payment method when you're completing your initial claim application. You can always update your direct deposit information or change your method of payment by logging on into the UI claimant portal. You can find a lot more information about how the prepaid debit cards work on DWD's UI website. Visit jobcenterofwisconsin.com/jobloss. In addition to selecting how to receive payments, you'll also need to decide how to handle tax withholding since your payments are considered taxable income. You can decide not to have DWD withhold taxes, or you can opt to have DWD withhold 10% of your weekly payment for federal taxes and 5% for state taxes. Elect to have taxes withheld online through the UI claimant portal. DWD will automatically withhold child support from your UI payments if there is a court order from a child support enforcement agency. DWD generally issues your payment within 7 days of you filing your weekly claim. Of course, this is assuming you are eligible to receive a payment for the week. Your payment will either be directly deposited into the account that you specified, or the money will be added to your prepaid debit card. You should know that Wisconsin does have a waiting week. This means that you will not receive a UI payment for that first week that you would otherwise be eligible for a payment. Here's an example. Jordan becomes unemployed on January 6th. He files an initial claim application and a weekly claim on January 10th to claim a UI payment for the week of January 3rd. On the weekly claim, Jordan reports working a total of 16 hours during the week of January 3rd, along with income earned for those hours. DWD determines that he does qualify for UI and a partial payment for the last week he worked. However, because of the waiting week, Jordan will not receive a UI payment for the week of January 3rd. Jordan will receive a UI payment after filing a weekly claim for the next week Jordan is unemployed. The key thing to know is that your waiting week will be triggered once you file your weekly claim and DWD determines that you're eligible for a payment that week. So file your weekly claim for that first week you're unemployed or have reduced hours, and DWD will determine if that can serve as your waiting week. Now, let's talk about eligibility. We already covered that if you don't earn enough in your base period, you won't qualify for payments. But there are some other criteria you'll most likely need to meet before you'll be eligible for UI payments. First, you must be able to work. That means that you are physically and mentally able to work. If during the week you're claiming you were sick, injured, or had any other health-related restrictions, you will need to report that on your weekly claim. While this doesn't necessarily disqualify you from UI payments, it is something that DWD will need to investigate. Second, you must be available for full-time work. DWD considers full-time to be 32 hours or more. If you are unemployed, being available means you don't have any barriers preventing you from accepting full-time work. If you are working reduced hours, being available means that you don't have any barriers preventing you from working full-time and you're willing to work full-time. Examples of barriers include lack of childcare or transportation, going to school, and being on vacation. You will need to report any restrictions on your weekly claim. Third, you must also perform work search actions for the week you're claiming. Performing work search actions means you're doing things to help you land a new full-time job. Examples include submitting a resume or application in person or online to an employer that is taking applications, registering with a staffing or placement agency, posting a resume on an employment website like Indeed.com or CareerBuilder.com, meeting with a career counselor, or attending a resume workshop. There are many other types of acceptable activities that can count. State law sets the required number of work search actions that you must perform each week. 4 work searches are required. Go online to jobcenterofwisconsin.com/jobloss to see more examples of acceptable work search actions as well as general work search frequently asked questions. You'll need to document your work search actions. You can do this one of 2 ways. You can log on to the UI claimant portal and enter your work search actions throughout the week. When it comes time for you to file your weekly claim, all of the information you added will automatically be transferred to your weekly claim certification. Or you can wait until you file your weekly claim and enter your work search actions then. Sometimes DWD waives the work search requirement. If you are required to do work searches, you will be given these instructions during your initial claim. There are circumstances where you may not be eligible for one or more weekly UI payments. Some common disqualifications occur when you're not able and available for full-time work, you do not complete the required work search actions, you are fired for misconduct or substantial fault, you refuse work without good cause. This could be refusing an offer for a new job or work hours with an existing employer. You miss more than 16 hours of work with the current employer. You quit a job without good cause. Let's cover a bit more about refusing work and quits. You may be wondering, do I have to accept any job offer that comes my way and risk losing my eligibility for UI payments? You will continue to be eligible for UI payments after refusing an offer for work if the wages, hours, or other conditions are less favorable than those for similar work in the area. However, it is important to know two things. One, report the refusal of work on your weekly claim for the week it happened. And two, DWD will determine, based on the facts of the situation, whether you had good cause to refuse the work. This happens after you've refused the offer. DWD is unable to advise you whether you should or should not accept the offer for work. If you do refuse work without good cause, you will be ineligible for any other future UI payments until you have earned 6 times your weekly benefit rate. Let's look at an example. Trina is collecting UI payments. A company extends a job offer to her, but she doesn't accept it because she's not interested. She reports it on her weekly claim for the week it happened, and the company notifies DWD of her refusal. DWD investigates and determines that the refusal of work was without good cause. Trina is now ineligible for any more UI payments until she earns $2,220. This amount is 6 times her weekly benefit rate, which is $370. Remember, the weekly benefit rate varies by individual. Not everyone will have a $370 weekly benefit rate. But if you refuse an offer of work within the first 6 weeks of your last day you worked, DWD will compare the wage and skill level of that job offer to jobs that you have had over the last year. For example, Joe was earning $30 an hour when he lost his job. 3 weeks after losing his job, he refused a job offer for $19 an hour. Joe reports the refusal on his weekly claim and DWD investigates. Because DWD determines the wage would be significantly less than what Joe had been earning, Joe is eligible for UI payments. Remember, answer the questions only for the week you are claiming. In other words, just for the week for which you are seeking payment. For example, when asked if you refuse any work that was offered to you, you are being asked if you refuse work during the week that you are claiming. If you did not refuse work during that week, answer no. Quits are handled in a similar way. When answering questions in the online UI Claimant portal, you will be asked if you quit your job. Report your quit on your weekly claim only for the week it happened. If DWD determines that you quit your job without good cause, you will be ineligible for any UI payments until you've earned 6 times your weekly benefit rate following the quit. Wages in the week of the quit can't be used to requalify even if they are earned after the quit. Here are 2 common questions and answers related to work refusals and quits. Number 1. If my employer relocates and I quit my job because of that, am I eligible for UI payments? Yes, you would be eligible so long as the new location is not within what DWD considers a reasonable commuting distance. DWD determines reasonable commuting distance based on where you live and the job's rate of pay. Number 2, can I try out a new job and quit if I don't like it without jeopardizing my eligibility for UI payments? If you quit a new job within the first 30 calendar days of starting, DWD will allow UI payments if you wouldn't have been expected to take the job in the first place because of the wages, hours, commuting distance, or working conditions. DWD will investigate and make the determination after you quit. DWD cannot advise you on whether you should accept the job or whether a quit would be with good cause. Okay, what about self-employment? Self-employment only impacts your eligibility for UI payments if it affects your availability for full-time work. You must report your self-employment and then DWD will investigate and make a determination. For purposes of filing your weekly claim certifications, income from self-employment is not considered wages, so it doesn't impact the amount of your UI payments. However, for example, selling branded products such as Arbonne, Pampered Chef, Roden and Fields, and Mary Kay is not self-employment, and therefore it can impact the amount of your UI payments. When completing your weekly claim, you will need to report the hours you worked and the commissions earned for that week. DWD will waive the requirements for you to be able and available for work full-time, as well as the work search requirements if you are in an approved training. You will be asked if you are attending school on both your initial claim application and your weekly claim certifications. If you enroll in school, report it and DWD will investigate to see if it's an approved training. Approved training may include training programs available through WIOA, TAA, and DVR, and other full-time vocational training programs. If DWD determines you are not eligible for UI or that you do not qualify for a weekly payment or payments, you have the right to appeal that decision. To appeal, you will need to follow the instructions provided on the written determination you received from the DWD. Remember, if you appeal or intend to appeal, make sure you keep filing your weekly claim certifications for each week you're seeking payment. If the decision is later reversed and payments are allowed, you can only receive payments for those weeks that you timely filled with a weekly claim. Always make sure that you are answering questions on the initial claim application and weekly claim certifications honestly and to the best of your ability. If you lie, conceal, or misrepresent any information, that can be considered fraud. Some examples of fraud include intentionally not reporting hours worked or wages earned, or lying about doing work search actions on your weekly claim certifications. DWD has various ways to detect fraud, and if DWD determines that someone committed fraud, the penalties are severe. Claimants who commit fraud must pay a penalty of 40% of the overpaid benefits. Plus, the person could face a loss of future UI payments and criminal prosecution. When you return to full-time employment or wish to stop receiving UI payments for any other reason, just stop filing your weekly claim certifications. You do not need to contact DWD or do anything in the UI claimant portal. You may be wondering how retirement benefits might impact your UI payments. First of all, regular Social Security retirement payments do not impact your UI payments, so don't report them to DWD. However, you must report to DWD if you have applied for or are receiving any other types of retirement plan payments. The most common types of retirement plans, other than Social Security, are pensions, 401k, 403b, 457b, and railroad retirements. You might receive these payments on a monthly basis or some other periodic basis, or as a lump sum payment. You are required to report these other types of retirement payments on your initial claim application and your weekly claim certifications if you've applied to receive or are receiving them. Only retirement payments funded by a base period employer can reduce your UI payments. There are many different reasons why people might want to work for temporary help agencies, sometimes also called staffing agencies. If you choose to go this route, there are a few things you ought to know. First, the temporary help agency is considered your employer, not the company where you are placed. This is important to know when filing your initial and weekly claims. Second, if you quit working for the temporary help agency or you refuse work offered by the agency, DWD will look at the conditions you have agreed to work under. If you had specified the type of assignments you were willing to accept, including the type of work, rate of pay, hours and availability, and distance you were willing to travel, DWD will consider this when determining if you're eligible for UI payments. Third, if DWD investigates your separation from the agency, it will consider the agency's policies, including rules about how to call in an absence, and notify the agency at the end of an assignment. Be sure to read these policies as they may impact your future UI payments. Thank you for joining me today. We hope this video is helpful in understanding how UI works. Remember, there's quite a bit of information online that expands on what we discussed. For the most up-to-date information, visit dwd.wisconsin.gov/UIBen. We wish you the very best and a successful return to work.